Okay, we're going to learn how to make a pie. This one's buttermilk, so it's pretty easy. First we're going to do the crust, which is probably the easiest thing of all. Now, I'm going to make it for one pie, so I've already put 1 cup of flour in here. And we're going to use some Crisco. The sticks are good because they're already pre-measured. And it's 1 cup of flour. Half a stick of this, which is the same thing, is half a cup. Right inside the bowl. I usually use a bigger bowl when I make 2 crusts at once or a fruit pie, but here we're just going to do this. A little bit of salt. This is just enough to put in the palm of your hand. Now, for this amount, we're going to use 1/4 of a cup of water. Tiny amount. The colder it is, the better it is. That tap water usually works pretty good. Scoot this over here. Now, good way to keep your pie crust from sticking to the plate, just sprinkle the plate with a little bit of flour, not a whole lot. Now, I use a pastry cutter, and all that's going to do is it's going to cut the shortening into the flour. You're going to do this until the flour and the shortening mixture, it's going to look kind of like cornmeal. Some people say or mealy, but it's really just until it's all incorporated or it sticks together. If you see flour in the bottom of your bowl, then you need to add a little bit more Crisco. And as long as the surface is smooth inside your bowl, then you're fine. Okay, and see how that just comes right off of there? Flaky to begin with. I don't know if you could see that, but we'll stick with that. Then you make a little well in the bottom of your bowl, and you just pour your water right in there. Now, get that all in there. Now, it's going to stick to your fingers at first, but then as it starts to make the dough, it'll all stick together. And it won't stick to your fingers anymore. You don't want to handle it too much because that actually does make the dough really tough. And you don't want a shoe leather pie. Now, you see that we've got a ball already formed. That's all you need. I'm done with that. Place that over there. Now, I keep my flour in an airtight container. And then I roll it out on a piece of parchment paper. I guess you could use wax paper. Some people have an actual pie dough plastic board type thing. But I'll show you in a minute why this works a lot better. Now, put a rolling pin. It's got a little flour on it, so nothing comes off or sticks to it, I guess I should say. Now, flour it over your dough. That way it kind of serves a double purpose to get the flour on top so we're not sticking to anything. Roll this out. This is big enough to make a 9-inch pie. Now start from the middle and just roll it towards the outside. Now you could buy your own pie crust and help Pillsbury make some more money, but why? Now, you'll turn this upside down right on top of your dough that you have rolled out there. And I'm going to go ahead use this knife I used earlier to cut my Crisco stick in half. And I'm going to trim it just a little bit, because these big floppy edges aren't what we want, because that'll just give it more reason to break. The bigger your pie crust is on the outside, the more likely that it is to break once you flip it over. Now this prevents you from having to roll it out and then try to get underneath it and turn it over. We're going to take that guesswork out, slide it over the edge, and just turn it over, and it will let go right there in place. Gently pat it down into your pie plate, and then come back around the edges and make your tall part of your crust. This is really going to act as the barrier, especially for the buttermilk pie, because it's going to rise as it's in the oven inside the shell as it cooks. This is going to make it to where it has some place to go when it rises before it kind of sits back down. It's not a perfect science, but it is done. Okay, now that that's complete, I'm going to get this excess flour off the cabinet. Clean up as you go, you don't have to worry about anything when you're done. All right, that's done. Take care of that in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and wash my hands. Now, for the inside. Now I've already measured out 2 cups of sugar. Go ahead and put that in there. Now, we're going to need a little bit of salt for taste. This is probably the same thing as, I'd say, 1/4 teaspoon. Remember, salt gives it flavor. Now, what's going to bind it together, I guess I'll go ahead and put this over here, I'll wash it in a minute, is flour. Now you can try and be exact with this. Go ahead and get my whisk out too. It's 2 tablespoons of flour to 2 cups of sugar. Now we could level this off, but it wouldn't turn out. To me, a tablespoon is about like that. Done. Let's put the flour. Okay. Now I'm going to mix the flour and the sugar together. Always mix your dry ingredients together, because once they get wet, they separate and you can't hardly ever get them put back together. Especially with flour, it will make it lumpy. Kind of like lumpy gravy. Ugh. Now, need 2 eggs. Set those there so they don't roll off. Then I have another mess to clean up. And vanilla from Mexico, the good stuff. I got this on my last trip to Puerto Vallarta, but actually I found some at Dallas Farmers Market. I don't have to travel all the way to Mexico to get it. Okay, now that we have the sugar and the flour combined, we got to put 2 eggs. I got this recipe from a friend of mine. He said, now I want you to beat those eggs, but not like you would beat a trashy white. Well, done both, so we'll go ahead and add a little bit of vanilla. This is really more like a tablespoon. And it sounds like a whole lot, but it's not. A little bit's good for you, a whole lot will cure you. Okay, now, the eggs, I don't know if you can see that or not, are just resting right there on the side. Just beat those enough to where they're kind of incorporated with the vanilla. You can see that little mixture up there. Then I've already poured out 1 cup of buttermilk. Put that in there. No sense in wasting any. Okay. Now, I'm going to combine all of this and get it smooth. It's the easiest pie in the world to make, including the crust. Okay, now that that's all mixed up, there's one more final ingredient. I do this first, melt a stick of butter, because you don't want it to be too piping hot when you pour it in here. Don't waste any butter. Okay, done. Now, we're going to mix the butter in with the rest of this concoction. Now, I don't have any proof of this, but I always get nervous if I put the hot butter in too close to putting the eggs in. I think I'm going to cook the eggs. I don't want to do that until I put it in the oven. Make sure there are no lumps, because what that'll be is your dry ingredients, and that's just gross. Now, wipe that off a little bit. Wash that up in a minute. Now, we're going to pour the filling. Now, one important thing to do also when you put this in here is take a look at it and make sure you don't have any holes in your pie crust before you pour that in there. Liquid, when it starts to heat, when you take this out of the oven, it's going to have a hole in it in the actual pie if there is a hole in the crust, because it kind of acts like a sieve, like a hole in a metal roof, and it will suck it underneath the crust. Ugh. Then you have pie under the crust. And it just never does cook right. You have a wet crust and a nasty pie with a hole in it. And then you're nobody's favorite, even though you do have a dessert when you come over. Okay, I'll set this aside. Put this in the sink. Now, this crust is good to go. Make sure that it's not folding over the edges any. Now it's very loosey-goosey, so open your oven first and very carefully put this on the top rack. At 350, I'm going to set the timer for 75 minutes. It's about an hour and 15 minutes. It usually cooks about an hour. When you cook it, after the hour and 15, which I set the timer for, when you take it out, when you shake it, if it still jiggles, cook it for about 10 minutes longer, then take it out. It will continue to cook after it comes out of the oven, but you want to make sure that it's as firm as possible before you take it out. Okay? Now we wait an hour and a half, or 15 minutes.